Everyone roots for the underdog, the little guy, the Cinderella. And today I'm going to tell you why there's big opportunity for you if you start thinking small.
Feeling good, getting better, feeling good, I can't let it go. I'm feeling good, 'cause I never say never.
Hello, and here we go. Welcome to another episode of The Geoff Wilson Show. March Madness is my favorite sporting event of the year, in part because of all the upsets. There's something wonderful about David beating Goliath, and this year's tournament has been full of that. The Final Four is a 4 seed, 2 5 seeds, and a 9 seed. Schools like FDU, FAU, Furman, and Princeton got big wins, while all of the favorites are long gone. Cinderella has found her slipper, and fans nationwide could not be happier. And there is an important lesson in this. Everybody loves rooting for the underdog. Whether it's in sports or just about any other aspect of life, we want to see the little guy rise up against all odds and make it big. We want the rags to riches story. It is the American dream. So why not make this your advantage? Play the underdog card. Whether you're a content creator just starting out or an entrepreneur launching a new business, position yourself as the likable small up-and-comer who people want to root for. Be the Cinderella, and you'll get many fans on your side. Today, we're going to talk about how you can apply this to whatever you are trying to do in life. And Kelly,
hi.
I'm so happy to have you back.
Yeah, it was nice. It was a nice vacation, but I'm glad I'm back also. Yeah.
I'm glad you're back. We missed you for a couple of weeks. You,
Yeah.
of course, we're all over the Irish countryside. We're going to hear more about this at the end of the show. I want to spend a little time hearing
Yep.
about your trip.
Well, there's a lot of good key takeaways that I think that we should definitely talk about from like a business perspective as well. But yes, I'm excited to talk about that.
Ooh, good. Okay.
Yes.
Awesome.
But
Well, we
why-
will get there.
But before we do, I do want us to start talking about this because it's completely applicable to what's going on right now in March Madness. I mean, we're talking about true underdogs.
Yeah.
We're talking about like
Florida Atlantic in the Final Four.
I know. Isn't
And
that
I mean,
crazy?
You have Miami too, who's a bigger football school, but has never been in the Final Four in basketball. You've got like literally 2 schools that have never been in the Final Four in basketball in Florida Atlantic and Miami. San Diego State, I don't think has ever been in the Final Four. So
have you seen a lot of fever then around the fact that like you were talking about Cinderellas right now? So have you seen the want and the desire to watch the Final Four increase now because of this Cinderella aspect? I mean, why do we as Americans care so much about that Cinderella story?
Yeah, people love the Cinderella. That's one of the things that I think draws so many people to March Madness. It draws me to March Madness every year. People love that team that breaks through that nobody expects, right? You know, our country, it's like the founding story of our country. We were the Cinderellas. We were the underdog.
Yep.
Like we were a group of maybe you could say misfits, or at least, revolutionaries over in England who said, we don't like the government. We don't like the taxes. There's a better way to do this. We need representation. So they come over here. They, sail across, come over here. They start America. Well, when they stop paying taxes to the British government, right? The British government doesn't like this. And then all of a sudden you have the Revolutionary War. And this is, after the Tea Party and all that kind of stuff. We were huge underdogs in the Revolutionary War. Like Britain, England, this was like the most established, like global dominant, fighting force in the world. They had all of the resources, all of the money. We're Cinderella over here in America, yet we won the war and America was started. And I feel like that attitude, the attitude that our founders of this country had, it was that David who had taken on the Goliath in England. And I feel like that attitude has permeated throughout American history. And I feel like that's the reason why America is known worldwide as being the most entrepreneurial country. We are. You get all the big startups here. You get all of the, there's so much attention and focus on, well, it's the American dream. I mean, you hear about the American dream. It is the American dream, right? That's what
So it's this want of just sort of like making your own path. It's this want of making your own foot ground. You know, they talk about this all the time when they talk about the concept of America, like streets are paved with gold.
Yeah.
You can come over, plant a flag.
Yeah.
It's this idea of claiming land or claiming this opportunity to make something of yourself, to make something new of what you are. I mean, I do think that's applicable to like what we're seeing at March Madness, the Cinderella story, and how this sort of dives into sports, because you're talking about these teams who are relatively unknown,
Yep.
right, on a huge stage, and they're coming and they're planting their flag and they're making a statement.
It's a great analogy. And of course you had the land rush and, you know, all that type of thing that happened in America, which was exactly that. It is essentially the American dream, right? The American dream is to come to this country and to be the underdog, be the person who comes here with nothing, but comes to this country and there's all kinds of opportunity. And you've got to work hard. You've got to hustle. You've got to make your way in order to be successful. You're not getting much of handouts, but if you come here to America and you're willing to work and you're willing to hustle, then you have a chance of doing something big. And in basketball, if your small team shows up to March Madness, if you won your little conference and you're this tiny little school, but you know, if you come into the March Madness tournament and you fight like hell and you take on the big dogs, you've got a chance. There's no one stopping you from being able to get to the Final Four, as we just saw with Florida Atlantic and some of these other schools. So it's that ultimate kind of, you know, David versus Goliath story. And so whether it's throughout the whole history of America or now it all translates into this one basketball tournament with this bracket. And the bracket's fascinating. Like March Madness has 68 teams that go into it. It's a very democratic tournament.
Everyone has an opportunity.
And that's not the case with almost any other sport, right?
Yeah.
I mean, like in college football, for example, there's such a talent disparity between the top teams and the smaller school teams. There's really no possibility for a smaller school team to win the championship. And the way the playoffs are set up, it's much more closed. It's a much smaller playoff group. You don't, you know, it's rare to get the Boise State or the Cincinnati in. Almost never happens, but then occasionally they get in, but then, you know, they tend to get thumped in the first game because of the talent disparity. But in March Madness, it's 68 teams. It's, you know, all over the nation, all sizes of schools, public universities, private universities, big schools, small schools, schools that have big sports programs outside of basketball, schools that have no football team and have very little of a sports program outside of basketball. It all coalesces together. And then once you are there on the court, it just all becomes who's better for that 40 minutes.
Yeah, on the day.
And it's so that's what makes it such an amazing tournament. But that you want that, there's like something about the purity of it doesn't matter where you came from. You get 40 minutes to settle it on the court, to prove to the world on an even playing field. There's something about that kind of translates to the, you know, dream of democracy, like the dream of like everybody is created equal. Everybody gets a starting chance. Our country gives people the ability to have, create their own path, create their own way. And granted, our country's not perfect at this. Like there's a lot of issues with economic mobility and there's a lot of issues with that, with people not being at the same starting point, but our country's a lot better at it than most.
Yeah.
And it's something that we've always embraced, is trying to have an equal playing field and let the best talent rise. I mean, that's one of the things about America that's so true. The best talent here has an opportunity to rise. Like we encourage the country, the government encourages entrepreneurs to rise up. It encourages innovation. It encourages people, as you said, to plant their flag and to make their own way. There's the chance for the best talent to rise in America and for talent to win. And that's the same as in March Madness. When you get those two teams, one's a 1 seed, one's a 16 seed, but you put them on the put them on the court for 40 minutes.
Yeah.
The best talent during that 40-minute stretch. They may not be the most talented team, in the nation by far, but during that 40 minutes, who's better, who hustles more, who plays harder, who makes the shots at the critical moments when they need to make it. It's very democratic. And I think it's one of the many reasons why we love this tournament so much.
So you're saying March Madness is the most American sporting tournament there is?
I think so. Yeah, it is, because the ideals of it almost, it kind of translate
Right.
beyond sport, right?
Right.
And that yes, I'm going to say it is the most American tournament that there is. And
I would agree with you. I think that when you're just discussing sort of about the democracy of how, on any given day, anybody that has the ability to, first of all, be there has the ability to go the distance, So when we see that, and we see that correlate into, like you're talking about with entrepreneurs, how does that sort of Cinderella dream work with entrepreneurs? How does it work with businesses? Like when you're talking about, and we have seen this, we've seen people like, the creator of Spanx was a teacher, and she created this product, and, now it's this global brand, and the company went public, and, she sees great success from that. How does this sort of Cinderella underdog story, how does that apply and become applicable to businesses?
Yeah, I want to talk about businesses. I want to talk about content creators. It's applicable in a lot of different ways, right? So with businesses specifically, when you're small, if you're just starting out, if you're a solopreneur, or if you've got a small business, you're agile, you're nimble. These are things big companies are not. Big companies are not agile and nimble. Small, when you're starting out, you can be agile and nimble. And there's something wonderful in that you can embrace opportunities as opportunities are presented to you. Here's a secret that a lot of people don't realize. A lot of people who are starting out in the business world, starting their own company, being an entrepreneur, maybe starting their own agency or their own service company, that they don't realize. The big companies, they all wish they were small. They're all jealous of the small people. If you're like if you have a small little agency with 3 or 4 people, and you walk into a boardroom at a Fortune 500 company, and you're presenting about why you should win some big project, even though clearly you're this small little agency, most people are like scared in that situation. Like, I'm too small. They're going to think I'm small. They're not going to give me the project because I'm small. How you should think about it is, because you're small, you're agile, you're nimble, you're responsive, you're able to provide amazing concentration and service to whatever you're going to do. That big company is none of those things. They're bureaucratic, they're slow, they're no longer innovative. They love the small guy who can be all the things that they are not. So you should actually embrace your strengths. And if you're small, your strength is that you're small. Your strength is that you're agile and that you're nimble and that you can give focus. Like, if I'm a big company, I would much rather work with a small agency where I know I'm going to be their biggest account. So that those 4 or 5 or 10 or 20 people who work for that small agency, they are going to care about me the most. And when I say I need something done by 9 a.m. tomorrow, they're going to get it done at 9 a.m. tomorrow, because I'm the most important thing in their world, right?
It's the trust.
As opposed to a big company working with a big agency, where that big agency's got 6,000 clients, and, oh, great, yeah, it's impressive that you're a big company, but we work with all these other big companies as well. There's definitely something to it. So if you're small, if you're that person starting out, no matter what line of business, think about the advantage that gives you and play to that advantage. You can really punch above your weight class if you think about the advantages that gives you, right? And there's also you can also fake it until you make it. Like, there's just because you're small doesn't mean you're not qualified, right? And so you can, and even if you inside have some like fear or hesitation around how qualified you are or are not to do something,
it's the imposter syndrome.
But everybody has imposter syndrome.
Right.
I mean, imposter syndrome is universal. Like, it's something that everybody has experienced. The only way to overcome imposter syndrome or lack of confidence is to just get out there and do it. And if you do it enough times, then you're going to start to feel comfortable with it, right? You got to force yourself into situations that are a little uncomfortable. If you want to grow your company and win big clients, and you've never worked with a big client before, you got to go pitch big clients hard.
Right.
And you got to win that first big client. Now that might feel uncomfortable the first time you do. You may be doubting whether you can actually deliver the way that needs to be delivered for this big client, but you got to do it. That's the only way to overcome imposter syndrome, to build the confidence, right? Like there's a lot of people that are nervous, and I've been this way, right? In certain social situations, like if you go to a party where there's a lot of, famous people at the party, or
Right.
you go to a business mixer where there's a lot of like really established people at the business mixer, and you're like trying to, you feel kind of below that level. You'd love to be at that level, but you're below that level. That creates natural anxiety. That creates natural nervousness. The only way to not have imposter syndrome and to get over that is to go and to force yourself to go. And the more times you force yourself into a situation like that, the more naturally comfortable you will be.
This is crazy because we're sitting here and we're discussing this, and I'm like literally listening to everything you're saying about going to a party and like just going and like being yourself. And it's like I'm sitting here and I'm listening to this, and the conversation today is about the Cinderella story.
Yeah.
And about, we just got into the conversation fake till you make it. The imposter syndrome, that feeling that you don't belong in a certain situation, that that you're not supposed to be there. It's so applicable to the Cinderella story because if you're thinking about it, in some ways it can be seen as the imposter syndrome personified, right? This, low country girl who has a fairy godmother that gives her the chance to go to this, party, and she meets the prince and it changes her life forever. But it is this idea. It's like, you just have to go despite the odds, despite what comes against you, despite the sort of, things that are built around you that can manipulate your mind into thinking about the imposter syndrome. It is that moment where you just have to allow yourself to be Cinderella, allow yourself to be like, I'm just going to go and we're going to see what's happened. And that it's like applicable, like you said, to the March Madness aspect of it. It's like, we got into this tournament. We made it this far. We might be dealing with imposter syndrome right now because, who would have ever thought we made it to the Final Four? But it's at that moment you just have to be like, I am the Cinderella of this moment, and I'm just gonna go, and I'm just gonna give it.
You got to tell yourself you deserve to be there, right?
Yeah.
And that's and March Madness is the perfect example of that, because yes, Fairleigh Dickinson, FDU, they were actually a pretty bad team this season. They didn't have a great record. They didn't even win their conference, but they get into the tournament. They're real, like, major underdogs against Purdue, who's a number 1 seed.
Yep.
And like, if they had just told themselves they didn't belong to be there, they actually really didn't belong to be there by any basketball standard. They didn't deserve to be on the same court as this team that by every basketball standard and analytics, projection, everything was so much superior to them. Yet when you're on the court, it's the ultimate equalizer. You got 40 minutes to prove it, right?
Yeah.
And of course, most of the Cinderellas are going to fall short. Most of them aren't going to, but sometimes the ball bounces their way and they get to prove it. They get the momentum.
That's incredibly logical to what you're saying with being in the boardroom and pitching a large client. You're in the room.
Yes.
Make it happen in the room.
Well, and so along those lines too, and I kept saying, like, you got to put yourself in the room and you got to keep doing it, right? And what you see with teams in March Madness is that sometimes you have these teams that are the Cinderella, but that consistently get back to the tournament. And then once they consistently get back to the tournament a few times, they then all of a sudden become legitimately dangerous in the tournament. I mean, we saw a team like Gonzaga, which is now considered like a basketball power and has been for several years. But there was a time when they were kind of the Cinderella, but once they started getting there enough times, then everyone's like, wait a minute, like, this is now a legitimate power school. Butler was that for a while, right? These small schools, Villanova was that for a while. These small schools with small enrollments and that kind of thing, but they get there, and then all of a sudden they become a favorite, and they're no longer really a Cinderella. And that's really the thing, right? It's like everybody starts at zero in life. And you put yourself in these situations. A lot of times, like, people who go on and become very successful, it's simply because they've given themselves more at-bats.
Yes.
They've put themselves in more situations. And if you do that, if you just put yourself in more situations, give yourself more at-bats, you're going to strike out. Everybody strikes out. But because you're there more times,
Yeah.
you're going to have more opportunity to get the connection or to have the conversation with a key person or something to happen that ends up creating a whole new pathway, a whole new opportunity for you in life.
Yeah. So you said this is applicable to businesses. How is a Cinderella story then applicable to content creators?
So, I mean, I think content creators that are just starting out, they can leverage that to their advantage as well. People like helping people that are on their way up. People like helping people that were where they were, you know, a year ago or 2 years ago.
You
or something.
remind me of me.
You remind me of
Yes.
me. I want to help you out, right?
Right.
So use that to your advantage. Now, I think it's most effective to try to connect with somebody who's like one layer above you. Sometimes it's difficult. If you're a brand new content creator and you're trying to connect with a content creator that's got, you know, 1 million subscribers,
Yeah.
that's difficult.
That's a higher jump.
Because of the fact that, of course, you know, content creators are being inundated with people coming and everything like that. But if you're just starting out and you're trying to connect with a content creator that's got like 3,000 subscribers or 5,000 subscribers, you know, who was in your shoes a year ago when they were just starting out, like that's a connection that more easily can come together and can happen and can help take you to that level. And then once you're at that level, you can try to, you know, connect above and kind of go to the next level, right? I think, you know, I think taking advantage of that, I think just being able to make those kind of connections. Another thing is that when you are just starting out as a content creator, you have the ability to be agile and to hop on whatever the hot news of the day is. I've seen some people in the sports card world do really well at this recently. Like they've on YouTube, they have been, you know, whenever there's a breaking story, if
Right.
there's a breaker scandal or
Right.
if there's a big announcement from Panini or Topps or anything like that, they're quick to have a YouTube video out about it. Very smart. Because of the fact that they're agile, they've got their own at-home stuff. They don't have a whole production team, which actually can sometimes, you know, slow you down.
Yes, I'm
Because, like,
aware.
here at Sports Card Investor, right, we have like, you know, we've obviously invested a lot into the quality of our production. So we have a whole team that works on the production. We do very professional sets and video editing and the whole thing. It makes the product look a lot more polished. But what it also does is it also means it takes longer to output anything because you're putting a lot of work into it. So sometimes if something happens, we're not necessarily, and we've also got busy schedules of all this video we're doing every day and these other things we're doing in the office. We're not always able to just, you know, drop everything on a whim
Yes.
because there's some news story and then suddenly shift and then get something out quickly. We're not always able to do that. As a small content creator, as a solo content creator, when you're not as worried about production quality, when you don't have a whole team that you have to align, when you're not working on 50 different, you know, projects and having a bunch of sponsors and all this kind of stuff, and when your setup is literally you flicking on a camera in your home and that gives you the ability to be agile, to be nimble, to respond a lot more quickly to breaking news, to get content out before others do, which is a real advantage. Once again, if you're small, that being small can actually be an advantage, but you have to think about what is it about me being small that I could actually use to my advantage and then play into those strengths that you have.
Fake it till you make it.
Fake it till you make it.
We keep coming back
it
to
till you
this,
make it.
and it's you're making such good points because I think the underlying thing here is one, you just got to put yourself out there.
Yep.
And I do think, you know, when we talk about networking, we talk about connections. If in general that you're starting out, the point is to talk with people. The point is to get yourself out there. Nobody's going to know who you are if you were shut door and you're not communicating with anybody else or you're not interacting, or, you know, social media has such a great playing field in that response that literally anybody can comment on anybody's thing if they have the comments available. But it's, you know, you find other people who content is attractive to you and that you want to connect with and build this relationship with. And it just starts by, you know, being responsive to what they're making, you know, maybe figuring out if there's ways that you can meet them in person, or, you know, just building these small communities that will blend into larger communities, that will blend into even bigger communities. But it's, again, it's this discussion of getting into the room, right? In order to get into the room, you had to at least start on day 1 and put yourself out there. You had to start on day 2 and put yourself out there. You had to spend all of this time to get to a point where you had the ability to then pitch in the room. And then when you get in the room, it's that same thing we talked about. It's just going for it. It's allowing yourself to say, hey, I might be the Cinderella. I might be the new content creator. I might have 5,000 follows. I might have 1,200 follows. But on this day, in this moment, I am me. This is why I deserve to be here. It's battling that. It's accepting this sort of Cinderella mentality. And I think that's such a great, point to make. And as you said in the beginning of all of this, it's like what this country was built on. It was built on this idea that anyone from anywhere can be anything. And I think that's so incredibly powerful. Now, when we're talking about content creators, I mean, was there any other thing that you think that you can give as an advice of what they can do or things that they can play into? I mean, can they literally say, I'm a Cinderella, like I'm an underdog and I'm going to play into the underdog and like maybe brand themselves that way?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I think they could certainly introduce themselves that way in like one-on-one conversation, because again, people like to help people that are coming up. So I think if you reach out to someone and say, hey, I'm just starting out, but I'm really ambitious about this. I'm really serious about this. I really want to make an impact. I see what you've done. It's amazing. I would love to, I'd love to achieve that someday. And I think people want to help and support that story.
Yeah. And so outside of them just being reaching out and connecting and then having this ability to be agile, or is there anything else that these content creators, these businesses can do that would maybe be seen as more advantageous to them outside of like these big established companies?
Sure. Well, yeah. When you're small, you have the opportunity to you have the chance to go to where the opportunity is more, right? So I talked a minute ago about how you could hop on like a breaking news story quicker and that kind of thing. I love whether it's content creation or business, companies that pick a niche, I think makes it a lot easier for them to stand out from the crowd, because there's something, if they pick a niche, there's something that they stand for. There's something that they're focused on that is different than others, which naturally provides a differentiator, right? When you're small, you can kind of figure out what that niche is going to be for you. You could play with a few different niches, figure out where you're going to start to get traction, whether this is content creation or business, and then start to go heavier into that particular niche. When we started Sports Card Investor, we chose a niche. Our niche was around the dollars and cents behind sports cards. That's why we were Sports Card Investor.
Right.
There was some other sports card content on YouTube, not a lot, but most of it out there was breakers and was people opening up packs, pack ripping. There was no one on YouTube that was talking about, dollars and cents and that kind of thing and having like a show format like we do. So I said, all right, well, that's going to be the niche for us. We're going to, and then, over time we broadened and we do a lot of collector content now and everything like that. But originally having that niche gave us a very clear identity and allowed us to grow. So I think picking a niche makes a lot of sense. And when you're small, you can, again, experiment with different niches. One thing that I think is very important and a big advantage to being small, constraints drive creativity. What people don't realize is sometimes in business, it's better to have too little money than too much money. I have been part of companies and startups that have had a lot of money. Tons of investment capital, big venture capitalists writing checks, money to burn.
Right.
And often they burn it because there's pressure to spend the money and to try to grow. They haven't necessarily quite figured out yet what's going to work and not work. They don't have the pressure to have to make the correct decision every single time because they have so much money in their war chest. I have been a part of companies that are bootstrapped, that have very little money to their name. They stress over every decision, every expenditure, every dollar they're going to put out there. They treat it like it's their last. Oftentimes, their decision-making is therefore much better, much more crisp. They're using their money in much wiser ways. And I've seen those bootstrap companies with that mentality go far beyond the big company with the big money behind them that ends up whittling it all away, never treating it like it's that valuable of a resource, spending it in a bunch of dumb ways. Constraints drive creativity. Oftentimes being limited in money, being limited in size can mean that you're smarter and you can accomplish more.
Yeah, you actually say it good. Constraints drive creativity. It's a creativity in that I think that's also applicable. I mean, these companies have less to work with. You have to be more creative with what you have. You have to be more creative in the fact of like, well, maybe we can't afford to go on this, 200-person company retreat to Baha Mar, or, we can't, bring LeBron James in for a meet and greet with the whole team. But there are things, and those are very outlandish circumstances, but there are things that people will do when they have little to work with, but they allow themselves to think of what they want and then how can they manipulate what they have within their possessions to achieve it. I think it's a very creative way. So in some ways, like you said, you've been on the constraint side and you've been on, the larger side. So to you, within all of the companies that you've owned or that you've invested in, how do you use this sort of Cinderella theory in your own business sense, in your own business life? Like, do you look at, the companies that you have that might be a little bit more underdog, and do you, use this strategy of, being in person on day of, 40 minutes to play type of mentality when getting these big opportunities? And for your other companies that are larger, like, how do you work with, or how do you play into that sort of Cinderella mentality?
Yeah, that's a great question. A lot of times it comes down to the founder, right? So like we did an episode a few weeks ago about like having a chip on your shoulder and about how I would rather invest in the founder that, it feels like they got their back up to the wall. And so I think that plays into the Cinderella mentality. I mean, if you have a founder that is extremely motivated and feels like they have something to prove to the world, then no matter how much or how little resources they have, chances are they're going to try to find a way to make it work. In the early stages of any business, I think it's better to have a fairly lean amount of resources, but to have a founder who's willing to work 24/7, who's willing to hustle, who's willing to chart a path and not accept no as an answer and figure it out. And then once they've started to find the path, once they've started to show some traction, then you can add cash in order to allow them to, expand what they're doing, several fold. But I think it's important because as you get to be a bigger company, and I've seen this at some of my companies, as your company gets to be $10 million in revenue and whatever, it's easy to start overspending. It's easy to start having the luxuries. It's easy to start maybe not hustling quite as much, maybe not working quite as hard. And if that attitude becomes kind of pervasive amongst your team, that can become a real problem. And you can go from being a real entrepreneurial, up and coming, feisty company to a bit of a lazy, corporate, politics can seep in, all that kind of stuff. So you got to be careful about that. You got to kind of do whatever you can to maintain that, kind of underdog status, that fight throughout the company, throughout the leadership, because that's absolutely going to serve you best.
Yeah, I'd love for us one day to just maybe like discuss like company culture and that type of thing, because I think that's a very interesting conversation about team building and, ways that, people can do those types of things. But through it all, I think the real question here is, who do you think is going to win March Madness?
Oh boy, that's a tough one.
What's the pick?
This tournament so UConn is the team that has looked dominant so far.
Right.
But if this tournament has taught us anything, it is that the smaller schools have been, the underdogs have been the ones that have been surprising people. So I'm going to go San Diego State. Why not?
Wow.
San Diego State's going to win the tournament.
Not?
How about that?
Okay.
How about that? Not many people
did
are
all the
picking
boys
them.
get that bet in? So Geoff just picked San Diego State.
There you go.
Put some money on that.
We're calling it here. We're calling it here. But anyway, Kelly, I want to make sure that we get a chance to talk about Ireland, what you saw over there, what you observed. How was you were over there for what, about 2 weeks, a little over 2 weeks,
almost
right?
2 weeks. Yeah. So, first off, it is exactly as I say. It's very green, so much green. People incredibly nice. But the one thing that was like a huge takeaway for me, which is something that I'd love to see us as a country in America sort of grow a little bit better, is the ease of transaction. So over there, they like pretty much almost anywhere you go, they do tap to pay.
Okay.
So it's credit card,
Yeah.
tap to pay,
Yep.
watch, tap to pay, phone, tap to pay. I could be in a random city on the west coast of the country in a small pub where there are locals there just drinking a beer, and you think, oh, it's going to be cash or
Yep.
it's going to be some sort of like weird transaction. It's all tap to pay. The entire country, no matter where you go, it's tap to pay. It's incredibly advanced. The ease of transaction between you buying something and you tapping the card and then you're done, and then it's like, it's just so smooth. And it's grocery stores, it's quicker, it's it's encouraging consumerism, but it's doing it in a way that is more convenient to the consumer. And I find that so fascinating because we've started doing it here in America. Although you find places like grocery stores where you can't tap to pay right now. And it like that is problematic to me. I am by nature somebody that like, I don't like to carry a lot of things on me. I'll have a small wallet, or I'll have my card, like my phone on me that has my wallet in there and also has like an electronic license. I don't like to carry a lot of things. So for me, when I go to a sporting event, we've got this wonderful Mercedes-Benz Stadium and everything's cashless, which, maybe some people don't want, but it's also tap to pay everywhere. I take my phone and that's all I need for the day because that's my credit card, that's my license, that's everything. So I don't need anything else. And I think that, when we talk about the ease of transactions and like how us as a country encouraging consumerism to where it's something, it's honestly, the problem is it made it so easy to pay for things that I started paying for more things. So I started giving the country a lot more money because it was easier for me to do so. It was just tapping a credit card. It was, it was saying, oh, I can just, there's my card, oh crap, I just bought a lot of money on sweaters when I don't need it because it's 80 degrees in Atlanta. But it's, I mean, what are your thoughts on like the consumerism bit where it's like encouraging consumers to have an ease of transaction with that? Because I think that if we were able to, and this is clearly logical and like just something that I've seen for convenience, but I feel like if it was more convenient to pay for things, gas, groceries, whatever, with a tap, you already have your phone on you automatically. I mean, there's got to be an easier way for us to encourage transactions, because I think as a company, we talk about wanting to have an economic stronghold. I feel like that's something that's got to be, we're already seeing it with like Apple where they store your credit card and it's like a click to pay. And
100%. No, I mean, businesses love this kind of thing, right? I mean, anything you can do to reduce the friction of somebody making a transaction or making a purchase is going to make them more likely to do it. I mean, it's the reason why casinos trade out your dollar bills for chips, because
transactions.
Correct. It takes kind of the mental, oh, these are dollars or whatever out of it. It's chips, and chips are easy to just move around. All the chips are the same size, no matter, if they're 5 or 25 or 100, and so it's just kind of easier to do, right? But yeah, no, 100% I agree. And it's interesting that America's behind on that. And you're seeing more of the tap to pay, certainly a lot more of it now in America than you did a few years ago. But you're right, it's not everywhere. It's not ubiquitous. And what I have not been to Asia. I'm heading to Japan this summer. I've heard that Asia was this way, like 5 or 10 years ago. Like they had the touchless payment transactions and the tap to pay and everything way before probably even Europe did. And it sounds like Europe's got it, is more advanced than America is. I don't know why. Like why our country typically leads in technology in a lot of other areas. And
I think there's a lot of hesitation on like a general want for technology to have, major advances. I think there's some hesitation on including this sort of technology, but I think if it was embraced, you'd see that people would end up, contrary to like what I'd like to do, I end up spending more money because it's the ease of the transaction.
Yeah. No, I mean, I agree. That it makes it a lot easier to, especially when with Apple Pay and that kind of thing, if, to not have to carry cards around at all.
Yeah.
Right now, it's never like Apple Pay has never caught on quite as much as it should because it's not universal that everyone will accept the tap to pay. So I cannot trust that I can leave my house with just my phone and be able to buy whatever I want from whatever restaurant I go to, or, I mean, frankly, most restaurants aren't going to take that at all, right, in America. So it's like I can't leave with just my phone. I've got to take my wallet because I've got to be able to hand my credit card to the waiter because they've, going to take it in the back and whatever. Whereas it sounds like, in Europe, in Asia, you could leave your house with just your phone and feel very confident that you're going to be able to use Apple Pay to pay for everything, through the tap to pay technology. Yeah, we need that here.
Yeah.
We need it here.
I mean, again, you end up spending more money. It's less time. The time between you paying and or the time like when the bill comes or you paying or you're checking things out, the time between the total and when you're paying is so much smaller that it takes that, it's almost that like buyer's moment where they have this ability to be like, oh, this is how much everything cost. You know what? Maybe I can take something out. It's that brief moment where you're like fumbling for your credit card or you're finding your cash or something. It's those minute or those seconds there that allows the consumer to stop and think about their purchase, which makes them more hesitant to buy, right? If they have the ability to wait, to consider the purchase, to consider, oh, should I be buying this right now? You're less likely to get their money because there's that hesitation period. There was none of that. The only time, and this is going to probably give it, the only time I ever paid for anything that was not tap to pay was a tattoo that I got, which had to be cash.
In Ireland.
In Ireland, yes.
Oh, well, there you go. You got an Irish tattoo. Very
I got an
nice.
Irish tattoo from a Irish guy who lives in Italy but works in. It was so it was that tattoo parlor was crazy. Great tattoo artist there, but the entire experience in Ireland was wonderful. Wonderful people, really green. I highly encourage if you get to go, get a car. Drive around the country. You're going to just wind up in a random pub somewhere and they will talk to you. They will definitely talk to you. Great stuff. I had a lot of good time. Yeah.
Did you that's really cool. So you're a big wine drinker.
Yes.
Now Ireland's not known for wine. It's known for beer and it's known for whiskey.
Yes.
Did you change your drinking habits or did you
Oh no, I did. Oh yes.
Okay.
Oh yes. There was a lot of beer. I tried, so I had not actually had a Guinness until I got to Ireland. I tried Guinness. Guinness tastes like soy sauce to me.
Yeah.
Like it tastes like soy sauce. And I was like, if I'm drinking this, I want sushi with this. And it was just never sushi around. So I was like, I can't do this to myself. There's a lot of beer. The transaction is beer. I mean, like we're talking about the ease of transaction. Like me going to a pub, it's going to be so much easier for me to ask for a beer than it is for me to ask for a glass of wine. And typically, if you do, they have house wines.
Right.
They don't have large selections, which I like.
Yeah.
I like the ability to choose what type of white I'm getting, what type of red I'm getting, and you don't get that there. It is beer and it's whiskey. Now, I did taste a lot of whiskeys while I was over there. Not a big whiskey fan. Most of that was, my sister's a big whiskey fan, so I want my sister. She tasted a lot of whiskey, and it was like her trying to tell me what she's tasting, and I'll taste it and be like, that's nice. I don't get any of that. There was one whiskey, though, which I actually brought for the company, which I'm going to make you drink a little bit after this podcast is over. But it's called Grace O'Malley, and it was the only whiskey that I tried while I was out there where I was like, I would legitimately drink this. Like neat, don't need anything with it. Like don't need to mix it to make myself feel better. It was generally very smooth, very strong going in, but the after, like that subtle, like smooth out. Oh, it's so good. I'm so excited I bought it for the whole company, so I'm excited for the company to
All
try
right, well,
it.
we're going to have to wrap this now so that we can go try this whiskey.
Yes.
But that's a wonderful story. Glad
Yeah.
you had a great time.
Yeah.
Hopefully everybody out there enjoyed it. If you all did enjoy it out there, make sure you subscribe so you can
Yes.
hear future podcasts of ours. We are on, of course, we're on YouTube with the full-length shows. We're on Spotify as well as Apple Podcasts if you want to listen by audio.
All the podcatchers.
All the podcasts. And then on social, we do clips from the show on It's Geoff Wilson on Instagram and on TikTok.
Heyo. We'd love to see you next time.
Awesome. Thanks, guys, for watching. See you next time.